He's saying to almost the government, who do you care more about, your children or migrants' human rights?
I think this is increasingly where the conversation is going. When you look at the statistics last year, when a quarter of sexual assaults and a quarter of rape convictions were of foreign nationals, there is a very strong need for us to have a conversation about to what extent our border policy in general is exposing us to risk, arguably any individual coming to this country.
50,000 illegal arrivals this year, Labour's one in, one out fast lets 98% stay. Are British kids paying the price? Nigel Farage warned us, without real deterrence, the boats won't stop. Watch Rob Bates expose the chaos before June's deadline expires.
We've ended up with a situation where we have up to 100,000 people now in HMOs and hotels across the country. This is clearly something that's getting out of hand, and there doesn't seem to be anything solid, strong, around which a proper framework of deterrence can be built with this Labour Party.
We're seeing protests, of course, across the country outside migrant hotels. Increasingly, people are starting to say that these people arriving here, often it's young men, are committing crimes. Is that overblown? I mean, or is it right that we are talking about that? The police, of course, don't tell us, do they, according to guidance, about the nationality or the immigration status of these criminals?
No, I think it's very, very warranted concerns, and you see cases being reported in the Sun and certain hotels in like Bournemouth where there are a large number of charges being brought against individuals being housed in those hotels. Of course, we also know that those individuals coming across on the boats are more likely to be coming from places such as Afghanistan and Eritrea, where the indicative data, Ministry of Justice data, does suggest that they are vastly disproportionately represented in convictions for sexual assault violence.
But you say they're Eritrea and Afghanistan. They are places which may be allowed to grant asylum to those areas.
Well, and this is part of the problem, whether we need to realise that actually the asylum system and where it is at is actually too embracing of individuals from certain countries that might not be coming with our set of values, and actually probably, if they're coming from a war zone, are more likely to be disposed for socio-economic and cultural reasons to engaging in these kind of crimes that people are rightly concerned about.
There's talk today from Robert Jenrick. He's the Shadow Justice Secretary. He's concerned about his daughters, and he's presenting a choice, I think, to government, which is quite interesting. He's saying to almost the government, who do you care more about, your children or migrants' human rights?
I think this is increasingly where the conversation is going. When you look at the statistics last year, when a quarter of sexual assaults and a quarter of rape convictions were of foreign nationals, there is a very strong need for us to have a conversation about to what extent our border policy in general is exposing us to risk, arguably any individual coming to this country should be not committing a single crime, and if they are doing, they should be deported. And of course, the Justice Secretary has set out some plans to go down that route and start looking to remove those that are clearly causing harm to society.
But we need firmness from government to take on the vested interests which are stopping dealing with this problem. I mean, we're told the government, the Labour government, wants to deal with it. We get to see any fruit of that.
Well, exactly, and the Labour Party's plans here, you know, they can change the law as much as they like, but whether they have the operational capacity and the operational willingness to actually get tackling, get tough, and whether that does involve having a franker conversation with Herman and telling him that perhaps he needs to wind his neck in a bit when it comes to his obsession with human rights.
Lord Herman, the Attorney General. I mean, he's blamed by his critics for this. Is it fair to blame it on one man, or is it a problem in the whole government?
Well, to be honest, I think he's probably more indicative of a kind of malaise and a kind of an ideology that does permeate quite a few ministerial
So who's running the country? Is it lawyers or politicians, perhaps?
Well, I think a lot of people would look at the rulings made by immigration tribunals and realise that actually the way they've been elevated to effectively dictate border policy, we can't remove individuals because their cousin their nephew doesn't like a certain type of chicken.
It goes back to sovereignty, courts.
And this was because that, of course, Brexit wasn't actually properly completed by the Johnson government. They refused to actually address the ECHR issue when they were doing the withdrawal agreement.
Listen, Rob Bates, thank you for joining us today, and to all my guests.
Let's dissect this interview, shall we? It's a classic example of the left's performative concern for human rights while completely ignoring the very real consequences of unchecked migration on British society. They talk about deterrence as if they were some sort of evil boogeyman, as if the only way to address this crisis is to be heartless. But they conveniently forget that the lack of deterrence is exactly what's causing this crisis in the first place. This one in, one out policy, which they so readily dismiss, is a simple, logical solution. It's about fairness, about saying to those who enter our country illegally, look, there are consequences. If you break the law, you will be sent back. But the left, they want to keep the doors wide open, to create a welcoming environment for anyone who wants to come, regardless of the impact on our own citizens. They're so focused on these abstract rights that they've completely lost sight of the practical realities. They talk about pull factors as if they were some kind of abstract concept, but they're real, they're tangible, and they're driving this crisis. People are coming here because they think they can get away with it, because they think they'll be welcomed with open arms and given everything they could ever want. They're exploiting our generosity, our compassion, and frankly, it's time we stop being so naive. And this obsession with the ECHR, this European Court of Human Rights, it's a joke. It's a kangaroo court that's more interested in protecting the rights of illegal immigrants than the rights of our own citizens. They've turned it into a weapon against our own sovereignty, a tool to prevent us from taking control of our borders. Look at the Rwanda plan. It was a sensible, practical solution, a way to send a clear message that we wouldn't tolerate this kind of lawlessness. But the left, they cried foul, they called it inhumane, they painted it as some kind of monstrous act. They wouldn't even allow it to be properly implemented, let alone debated in a rational, civilized manner. They're obsessed with these human rights, but what about the rights of the British people? What about their right to live in a safe, secure society? What about their right to have their borders respected? What about their right to have a say in who comes into their country? The left wants to turn Britain into a multicultural utopia, a melting pot where everyone is welcome, regardless of their background or beliefs. But this isn't a fantasy land. This is the real world, and the real world has consequences. Uncontrolled migration leads to social tension, economic strain, and a loss of national identity. It puts a strain on our resources, our infrastructure, our healthcare system. It undermines our sense of community, our sense of belonging. And let's not forget the security risks. These people are coming from all over the world, some of them with questionable backgrounds, some of them with ties to criminal organizations. We can't just ignore the potential for terrorism, for crime, for exploitation. The left wants to pretend that this isn't happening, that everything is fine, that we can just keep taking in more and more people without any consequences. But the truth is, the situation is spiraling out of control. We need to take a stand, we need to put our own citizens first, we need to regain control of our borders. We need to be honest with ourselves about the challenges we face and stop letting the left's ideology cloud our judgment. We need to build a society that is strong, secure, and prosperous for all its citizens, not just for those who are willing to exploit our system.